to join us tonight. It's very special meeting. I do see we've got a chair over here. We've got a little bit more seating here, so don't feel like you have to stand. I'm so sorry, Lauren.
No, I invited her up.
This is also Scarlett's bookstore. You may have met Scarlett at this point. But we're really excited for tonight's event. Ever since we started Friendly City Books 5 years ago, one of the reasons I wanted to move back to Columbus is because of the W and the strong creative writing program at the W that's produced a lot of amazing new writers from Mississippi and beyond. I know a lot of you are visiting from out of state. So we're really excited to celebrate the launch of Lauren Rhoades and Kendall Dunkelberg's new books today. We got a little bit of poetry and a little bit of prose. We also have some books from other students and faculty members of the W's program that are here. We'll be open until the last person wants to go home tonight. So, and we're doing 15% off for W faculty, staff, alumni, anybody who's here to be a part of this and support the W tonight. So I'm going to turn over to Kendall, the director of the MFA program and the head of the Language, Literature, and Philosophy Department, the director of the Welty Symposium, and
one or two other things.
and Lauren, who is an alum of the W's Creative Writing Program, the director of grants for the Mississippi Arts Commission, and the founder of Rhoades magazine. All right.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily, and thank you for allowing us to invade your bookstore and have our opening here. I was going to give a brief introduction to Lauren. Emily told you a lot of it, but I will say Lauren moved to Mississippi from Denver. I don't know the exact year, but to do AmeriCorps, working with Foodways in Jackson, Mississippi. She started our program and stayed on there. Worked at Theodore Welty House, became Theodore Welty House's director, is now director of grants for the Mississippi Arts Commission, and is also the founder and editor of Rhoades magazine on Substack. If you don't subscribe to Rhoades, you should. It gives you lots of great information, besides my interview. Lots of great information from expats, from native Mississippians, and transplants like myself. So please welcome Lauren Rhoades with her new book, Split the Baby.
Thank you. And somehow Scarlett knew to jump off my lap just at the right moment. So thank you, Kendall. It's really special to be here just because the W means so much to me, and this program means so much to me. And you were on my thesis committee, which was when the germ for this book was a thesis for my MFA program, and Ellen Ann Fentress, my thesis director, is here, and Brandy Wilson, who is a wonderful teacher, Lamar Wilson. So it's so wonderful to just be in the room with you tonight. So my book is a memoir. It's called Split the Baby, and it's a coming-of-age story. I grew up in a very divided family. My parents divorced when I was 4 years old. And my parents just had very different parenting philosophies. They were just very different people. My father is Catholic, my mother is Jewish. And so they had very different views for how they wanted to raise my brother and I. And then I had a stepmother who entered the picture who kind of turned all of our lives upside down. And so the book is about growing up feeling very divided as a kid and learning how to become a whole person in young adulthood. So I'm going to jump around a little bit so you get a taste of different pieces of the book. And I'll just start with from the first essay, which is the title essay, Split the Baby. And that way you'll know where the title comes from. You probably may have guessed already. Okay, Split the Baby. I never liked the Solomon story. You know the one. Two women come to the wise King Solomon, both claiming to be the mother of the same baby. King Solomon tells the women that since there's no way to know who the real mother is, he'll just cut the baby in half. One woman calmly accepts his proposal. The other falls to the floor, pleading that Solomon not harm the child, that he let the other woman raise the baby. This display of maternal selflessness is all the proof Solomon needs to identify the real mother. The baby is hers. I first heard this story as a child in Hebrew school. As I sat on the carpeted floor that smelled like lemon cleaning solution, I wondered why the first woman was so ready to accept half a baby, or rather, a dead baby. Surely even a non-mother would prefer a live child to a dead one. And what if King Solomon's plan had backfired? Even his false proposal of infanticide seemed strange and cruel. The story nagged at me with all its horrible possibilities, its myriad loopholes. But I also couldn't help but dwell on the idea of cutting a baby in half. I was obsessed with the violent and graphic Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, especially the one where the little girl begs an executioner to chop her feet off because they won't stop dancing. And in the Torah, God was always coming up with creative and horrific punishments, wiping out entire cities, killing off the Egyptians' firstborn children, making the Jews wander in a desert for 40 years, flooding the world, slicing a baby down the middle, splitting its skull like two halves of a peach didn't seem completely far-fetched. In my own gruesome version of the story, the baby survives, and each woman leaves the palace with half a baby cradled to her chest. One arm, one kicking leg, one watchful eyeball, one dimpled butt cheek. Each half baby would grow to be a half child, a half adult. Half a mouth, half a brain, haunted by the desire to be whole. As a child, too, I too felt split in half, pulled between the disparate worlds and needs of my divorced parents. Every child wants to be wanted, and I was wanted, but I did not understand the depth of that desire, its bitter vastness. This is what the wise king knew, that it is possible to become a fanatic of wanting what you cannot have, depriving others of what you yourself are deprived. That bitterness can taste sweet like honey drizzled on unripe fruit. Nevertheless, the body remains indivisible, singular, whole, or nothing at all. And I'll pause there. So this book has had various titles. It started off with my thesis title, which was called Children of Divorce, which is not a very attractive title for a book. And this essay used to be called Solomon's Story and eventually landed on Split the Baby, which is the final title for it. The next chapter I'm going to read from, and I call it a memoir in pieces because it's generally follows a chronological arc, but it is sort of fragmented, and originally, each piece was supposed to stand on its own as like its own essay, and I tried to, make it more of a smooth narrative arc, but it still is sort of a fragmented structure. And so this next essay is from later in the book. Mirror, Mirror on the Wall is the title, and it's actually one of the first pieces that I wrote for the book in one of my nonfiction classes. And this essay is just about sort of the different ideas of beauty that my mother and my stepmother had, different ideas about femininity and what it means to be a woman, and a beautiful woman at that. And I guess one thing I'll also mention as context is that I draw from a lot of different documents for this book. So my stepdad saved court documents, legal documents, a parenting diary, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And one of the documents that he saved that I drew from on this book is called, it's a parenting evaluation. So we had a court-ordered forensic psychologist named Dr. Katz, who was basically assigned to do observations in order to determine custody time for my parents, of my brother and I. And so he spent like maybe a month or two working on these reports, just doing home observations with us. We would go to his office. He interviewed each member of my family. He interviewed me and my brother, and he compiled this 80-page document, which my stepfather sent to me as I was beginning work on these essays. And it was such a gift because it was a glimpse of our family from an objective outsider's perspective, which is like a memoirist like gold mine. But it really just gave me some more insight into my family and also into what I was like as a child from another perspective. So I will mention the parenting evaluation at some point in this essay. Okay, this is Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. I have never felt more beautiful than I do now, sitting in this swivel chair, staring at my face in a movie star's mirror, the kind framed with brightly lit bulbs. Behind me, the stylist teases out my bob cut into a dandelion puff and encases my head in a cloud of hairspray that settles like sticky pollen on my skin. Next to me, my new stepmother undergoes her own beauty treatment. Hot rollers, back comb, tease out, hairspray. Our faces are powdered, dabbed, brushed. We're having a girls' day out. Today, we are allies in the pursuit of beauty. See, she says, it's fun to be pretty. The Glamour Shot stylist swipes my eyelashes with mascara, and like magic, my eyes seem suddenly larger. They're blue, like Dad's, with flecks of gray and green. They glitter like tiny oceans, reflecting the mirror's light. My blonde hair comes from Dad's side, too. Even Mom says I look like his sister, my Aunt Mina, though she predicts my hair will darken as I age. No, it won't, I tell her, refusing to relinquish my golden hair. Already, I have learned the ways in which beauty and lightness are intertwined. The stylist applies dabs of rouge to my cheeks, creating the illusion that I have just come in from the cold. The face in the mirror belongs to someone else now, someone more outgoing, less afraid of making a mistake, someone who thinks it's fun to be pretty. She bats her long eyelashes back at me like a Disney princess. Glamour Shots is inside Park Meadows Mall, tucked between Claire's and a pet shop where Mom thinks the animals are mistreated. Bubbly pop music floats through the air. Overhead, there's a TV where you can see your photos and pick out the ones you like in real time. The stylist shows me all the different shades of lipstick, arranged like flowers in a bouquet. I pick out a light pink. Crystal chooses a deep red. Her thin hair is teased so high it looks like cotton candy. Look at us, she says, squeezing my waist and pulling me to her like mother and daughter. I file this moment in the category of things I won't ever tell Mom. Our Glamour Shots package includes 2 outfits and 2 poses. For the first photo, I pick out a denim jacket and a floppy-brimmed hat with a big sunflower pinned to the front. My attempt at a coy smile looks more like a gap-toothed grin, head tilted to one side, my hands popping out the collar of my jacket. With the Glamour Shot soft focus applied, my skin is as smooth as plastic. Crystal and I pose together for the second shot. This one doesn't involve outfits, but elastic tube tops which won't be visible in the photo. We kneel and the stylist drapes a fluffy pink feather boa in front of us at chest level, creating the illusion that we are naked, floating in a luxurious pool of feathers. Glamour Shots was so ridiculous. I'm like, I don't like the exposed feeling of wearing the tube top, of my bare shoulder pressed against her bare arm. She wraps her arm around my waist and squeezes. Her acrylic nails press into my skin. I am beginning to understand the way she moves through the world, touching hands, kissing cheeks, squeezing shoulders. I don't like kissing her on the lips the way she insists we do, but I'm getting used to it. Her attention is like a warm spotlight shining on you. When it's gone, you're standing alone on a dark stage. When I bring the photos home to Mom, she stares at them silently, as if willing the small squares to burst into flames. Do you like them? I ask. We're sitting at the kitchen table, which is scratched and stained from various craft projects gone wrong. She purses her lips, looking from the sunflower hat to the feather boa. I study her face, looking for clues. I've become attuned to her emotions, the way they vibrate beneath the surface of her skin like a taut string, ready to snap. I look from the mole on her right cheek to her dark eyes, to her nose, which she says looks like George Washington's in profile. Her expression hardens, and for a moment, I'm afraid she will cry. You're a beautiful girl, she tells me, the most beautiful in the whole world. You know that, right? I guess, I say, knowing already that there are different kinds of beauty, different tiers. Cinderella, for example, is beautiful when she's scrubbing floors, but she's even more beautiful when she's wearing a ball gown. You can tell by the way people look at her. I like the natural photos of you best, though, where you look like yourself. Her eyes search mine as I search hers. Something has broken in them, some fresh disappointment. I know, I say, wishing I had hidden the photos away in a drawer. Mom likes to say she is a natural woman. When she puts on makeup for work, she pokes around a bag of sample-sized tubes of rouge and cracked eyeshadow palettes. She wears flowy skirts and silver jewelry. Mom thinks she spends too much time on her appearance, says she is vain. We avoid saying Crystal's name. I can't help but think about JonBenet Ramsey when I look at you dressed up like this. It makes me sad. It's not right for little girls to wear makeup. Little girls are supposed to play and not worry about how they look. I know JonBenet from her photo on the news. She's a girl my age, or was before her murder, with pale skin and a fluffy pink dress, a tiny princess with a tiara on her yellow ringlets. In the photos they show, her skin is as smooth and airbrushed as mine is in the glamour shots. I wonder if Mom is telling me that beauty, the kind that involves hairspray and makeup, is dangerous, even lethal. Decades later, I will read the letter that Mom writes to Dr. Katz, who during this time is conducting a parenting time evaluation for our family. Mom will write, "You should have seen the photos. They made her look like a teenager." She doesn't want to hurt my feelings, so she frames the photo of me in the sunflower hat and puts it on the mantle, but hides it behind my new second grade school photo, which features my mismatched front teeth and crooked bangs. Sometimes I'll move my glamour shot to the front, only to discover that days later it's been hidden again. I just have to tell, my mom was at the Lemuria reading in Jackson, and unprompted, I had like some family photos. I had a glamour shots photo, and she said, "Oh my God, you always reminded me of JonBenet Ramsey in that photo." And I was like, "You know I wrote about that, right?" She was like, she completely had forgotten. Sorry, just a side note. Makeup, lighting, hairspray, the perfect angle, a soft filter, these are the beauty secrets of glamour shots, a manipulated moment captured on film. At Dad's house, the photo of Crystal and me is framed, placed on the antique vanity in my bedroom. You might mistake the blonde woman and the blonde child for mother and daughter if you didn't know better. In this house, decorated with antiques and oil paintings, there are certain standards of being, of beauty. In this house, my bedroom walls are painted purple. The bedspread is a butter yellow. A slender silver crucifix hangs on the wall above a small wooden desk. Crystal has arranged this room for the girl who lives here half the time, the girl in the glamour shots photo. This girl collects tiny porcelain boxes, reads Dear America diaries, watches her stepmother attentively as she curls her eyelashes, teases her hair. Lauren loves that I dress up, Crystal will tell Dr. Katz in their interview. She wants her hair and nails done. Lauren wants to be like me. At Mom's house, the standards are relaxed. The beds may not be made. There may be golden retriever hair on the carpet. My bedroom here is painted lime green, the bedside table bright pink. The color scheme is aggressively happy, upbeat, childlike. The girl who lives here wears overalls and baggy t-shirts, collects penguins, and reads every single book in the Little House on the Prairie series. On the doorframe of this bedroom hangs a mezuzah that the girl made in Hebrew school, the tiny prayer folded and tucked inside. Over the years, each bedroom accumulates more stuff, the extra detritus of living two lives. The girl bifurcates, refracts, doubles back on herself. She is mutable, reflecting whatever world is around her. In his final parenting report, Dr. Katz will write that one of the girls' bedrooms is too formally finished and the other is too unfinished. He will say that the girl should be encouraged to define herself through what she puts in her room, what she hangs on the walls. I remember talking with Dr. Katz and showing him my bedrooms. I remember his black hair and small round spectacles and how he nodded intently and asked me questions which I did not know how to answer. The report is not intended to be read by the children, Dr. Katz will write, but I will read it years later when I am no longer a child. The sensation is like seeing oneself as a specimen through the eyes of a highly trained scientist, like reading a fairy tale about one's own life. In that report, I am Goldilocks, except everything is always too hot or too cold, too soft or too hard, too big or too small. Nothing is just right. Okay, so I'll pause there. And I have one last short excerpt to read. This one is a parenting diary chapter. And the parenting diary, just get a sip of water. is a document that my mother kept starting in 1999 for about a year. I was 10 years old, 10 and 11 years old. My brother was 7 and 8. And essentially she was recording observations as evidence for her lawyer because she believed that my father and stepmother were manipulating the children and turning us against her. We had been refusing custody time. And so my mother reluctantly sent me this along when I had been getting those other documents from my stepfather. And when I read it, I was just overwhelmed with her voice, because I was almost the age that she was when she was writing this parenting diary. And so I felt like in many ways I was relating more to her as a mother and an adult than to my childhood self. Just got a little emotional thinking about that. So I asked her permission to, I asked her permission to include excerpts from the parenting diary, and she said I could, because she's very supportive and wonderful. And so there's 5 different excerpts in the book, and then I excerpt her words, and then I respond to them with my own words in sort of a creative way. So this one's called Parenting Diary Fish Tank, and I'll read her excerpt first, and then you'll see I'll switch to my own voice. All right. January 16th, 2001. I came home from work at about 5:15 p.m., and Cecil looked very upset. Cecil's my stepdad. After I talked with Cecil, I went to Lauren's room, and she was sleeping on her bed with her coat on. I let her sleep until 5:45 p.m. She was supposed to go to her piano lesson at 6 p.m., and then woke her up to talk to her. I gave her some hugs and kisses and asked her what happened. Lauren told me that she went to her dad's house after school because she missed him. I asked her if her dad was normally home at 2:40 in the afternoon. She said no, he wasn't there today, but he had been there other times. She confirmed that she did this last week, and he was at the house with Crystal and had coffee with her when she got there after school. I asked her if she had planned this with them. She said no. I explained that I was very disappointed that she had lied to Cecil and me and that she had broken our trust. I asked her if Crystal came to her school to have lunch with her. She said, yes, Crystal came to the school and had lunch with her when she forgot her music books, and Crystal would come to school to give them to her. I reminded Lauren that I had bought double copies of her music books, and she was supposed to leave one copy at her dad's so she wouldn't have to carry them back and forth. Lauren didn't say anything. I asked Lauren to tell me how she was feeling and what was going on. She said nothing is going on. She just misses her dad. Then she then started crying and said Cecil told her this was killing me and she didn't want me to die. I told her what he said was a figure of speech. He was worried about me because this whole situation was causing me emotional distress. I told her not to lie to Cecil and me anymore and to make sure that she is not deceitful in her relationship with us and other people. Lauren then cried a little and told me she felt sick and shaky. I took her temperature and she was running a low-grade fever. I gave her some Motrin and told her to just rest and read her book for a while. She was very listless for most of the night, although she did come downstairs and play piano and have some dessert with Sam and Cecil and me. The next day, I let her sleep in and took her to school late. She did not want to go to school, but I didn't think she was sick. She appears to me to have the beginning signs of depression. No reason to go under the comforter, the white one with pink flowers when you have a ski jacket. I lie in hibernation, wrapped in my waterproof cocoon, knees curled to my chest. Winter shadows lengthen on the wall, then disappear. Through the window, I can see the roof of the neighbor's house, the skeleton of their poplar tree. My eyelids are heavy. I feel small but dense, like an asteroid. I'm hurtling through space, burning through the atmosphere. The coat is warm and I am tired. Time to sleep. When I wake, Mom's face hovers above me, her eyebrows knit in concern. Her cool hand presses gently against my forehead. She smells like cinnamon gum, winter air, and cigarette smoke. I love her, but I'm afraid of loving her too much or not enough, afraid that I can hurt her, that I've already cut her to the bone. My room is dark now, except for the blue glow of the fish tank. How long have I been asleep? From where I lie, I can see the plecostomus, mouth suction to the glass. The black mollies dart back and forth in and out of the plastic castle around the fake seaweed. I am indifferent to my fish, uncaring. I forget to sprinkle their smelly fish flakes in the morning when I leave for school, but Cecil always remembers to feed them when he gets home. If they depended only on me, they'd be dead. I tell Mom I don't feel good. She takes my coat, covers me with the comforter. I hear her footsteps on the stairs, muffled voices, the canned laughter of everybody loves Raymond, the dull clang of pots on the stove. I close my eyes against the fish tank's glow and let the heaviness take me. All right, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a hard act to follow. As Emily said, and as I think just about everyone knows, I'm Kendall Dunkelberg. And so I'll say a couple things that maybe you don't know. I grew up in Osage, Iowa, small town in northern Iowa, and via Chicago, Galesburg, University of Texas at Austin, came to Columbus, Mississippi in 1994 when Tom Richardson might have been involved. I think I interviewed with you. Bridget Fischel, Jim Keller, if people know some of those folks, Ginger Hitt, hired a comp-lit PhD to come to the W and teach English literature and composition. So I don't know what they were thinking, but they got me here. And pretty soon I started teaching World Lit and then took over the creative writing class, developed a creative writing concentration, and in 2015, we started with Mary Miller and Chris Lee, started the Low Residency MFA program, which is now finishing its 10th year. So we're thrilled about that. This is my first opportunity to read from my 4th poetry collection that came out in May, and I decided to hold off and have a launch. I mean, we were in finals and all kinds of fun things, so this was a much better time to have a launch, and it's great to be able to have that launch with Lauren Rhoades, one of our STAR alums. We have lots of STAR alums, but it's great to have her with us tonight. The book is titled Tree Fall with Birdsong, and I want to start with a poem about living in Columbus. I write quite a number of poems about flowers and birds, and I wanted to read this one because we've been having lots of fun with our spiderwort in our yard. This is titled Spiderwort. Not everybody loves it as much as I do. But anyway, I wrote this quite a while ago, in I guess 2011. After my sister passed away, she had breast cancer, was a survivor for about 7 years, but passed away. And in May, and that's the time that spiderwort is blooming. So I wrote this poem for her, and it's one of the reasons why I'm real stubborn about letting spiderwort grow up in our yard. If you don't know spiderwort, it is taller than 6 inches. We'll just say that, and it has purple flowers. Spiderwort for Catherine. Roots burrow in the dark, tunneling through clay, pushing, prodding to explore and blindly build a web in earth. Silken breath adheres to every grain of dirt. Tendrils split stone, reach water, draw life by osmosis through soil, pulling it higher till from the remnants of last year's stem, a thin, pale green shoot emerges. When sun warms winter's chill and the shoot thickens to form a stalk along which emerge long grass-like leaves, rough and firm, where in the crooks of each halm a single purple blossom unfolds around a yellow star, the way the soul emerges after death, as energy or memory, grief, passionate longing or relief of those who remain to discover this stark beauty. If you're listening closely, which I don't expect anyone to be able to do, there are 2 sentences in that poem. I like a 2-sentence poem. The next one is also a 2-sentence poem. I don't know why. I like playing with lines and sentences. That's why I like 2 sentence poems, or sometimes 3 or 4. But I like seeing how long can I sustain and where can I stop. This is one of the poems. There are several poems in this collection that are inspired by things I have seen or experienced while taking my morning walks along the Riverwalk. Patterns. This stone holds the pattern of fossilized fern, its amber leaflets still recognizable after eons, though the rock has been crushed and cemented in the path where now an orange and green, nearly black box turtle ambles across. As yesterday, an antlered young buck crossed the river, a black lab hard on its heels as he swam to the other bank, then ran along it, headed back, but turned tail, afraid of the dog who wagged much like the ponytail of the blonde jogger that flips in front of me and is followed by an old man whose indigo tattoo waves on his arm, a sign of his war, the way the fern must have waved in its wind, or the buck tossed his antlers before rising out of the water, safe on his side of the river for now. What is mortality in the face of this life, stretching for ages along a path both for future and past? And what are our fantasies of immortality when daily the patterns are reenacted? When you are trying to publish a book, you have to write a book proposal or a cover letter or that kind of thing, and you have to say, what is this book about? And one of the things that this book is about is death. I thought that's not a very appealing in a cover letter. It's all about death. So I call it loss and renewal. But one of the things I was thinking about as I was thinking, well, there's a lot of death in here. Yeah, I'm in my 50s when I started writing it, or maybe a little younger than that, and now I'm in my 60s. And there were family members and friends and colleagues, you start to see more of that. So of course it's in my collection. But there's also a lot about, it's not a sad book. There's a lot about kind of coming to terms with that and dealing with it, and about the cycles of nature. So that's why it's tree fall, which is the falling of the tree or the loss. And I ended up adding with bird song, because I write a lot about birds, and I see that as more the creative side, or the renewal side of things. So there are 4 little poems that didn't make it into my second book of poems, and that I eventually put together as one poem titled Bird Song. It's my only sex poem in the book, so listen carefully. Birds and bees, guys. The magpie gathers all that sparkles. He is a thief or a garbage man. He speaks to everything in its own tongue. Why then, when the heron flies, does he let his feet dangle below his wide, graceful wings? Is it to keep his balance, to steer like a ship? Or could it be the heron loves to feel the air rush deliciously between his toes? I could try to write of the flickers, but I never saw more than one of their maple-colored tails fanned out in flight. You saw 2 of them, a couple, lit on the trunk of a tree, their heads bobbing in unison, both searching for food. This spring, I see 2 brown feathers. This spring, I see 2 brown thrashers flying together as one ball of feathers. A creature with 4 wings and 2 tails in constant motion for a moment until they break apart, and I discern the female as one distinct bird, the male close behind, pestering. Now, I see them one at a time, flitting in and out of the camellia, one on guard as the other broods. I dedicated the book to my mother. A long time ago. My mother passed away in January at the age of 97 and 7 months. She would be 98 tomorrow. June 6th is her birthday. The cycle of poems titled Tree Fall, I won't read them all because there's about 14 or 15 poems in it, and they're long because I've gotten into writing long poems and long lines. But it concerns first a cherry tree that was blown down in our yard by a storm, and an apple tree that at the age of 89, she decided she was going to cut down the apple tree because she just couldn't keep up with all the apples. It was so prolific, and she couldn't give them away. And so she said, I'm going to cut down one tree, I'll just have them cut down both, which was sad, but we got it. So I wrote about the fruit trees, and then a year later, another storm came along and blew down 2 really big branches in a maple tree that had been in our front yard since before I was born. And it's a tree we used to climb in, and it was just a big part of our lives. And we knew, well, we didn't know initially what was going to happen with the tree, but pretty soon she called out the arborist or whatever, and, you know, it was hollow on the inside. They had to cut it down. So I wrote another cycle of poems, and then I eventually put them together about the maple tree as well. And it's really, in a lot of ways, was a way to tell my mother that I was aware of her age and that, you know, we don't all live forever. And she would tell me things like I mentioned in this poem, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, I get it. So I'm going to read one that it mentions her specifically, but they're all kind of thinking about how she's in her 90s and, you know, there's inevitability. It's titled A Necessary Lie. We believe a big tree will live forever, though we see the lie. We have known young trees and watched them die of drought. We have seen winds take out branches, even topple whole trees, tall pines or sturdy oaks, their trunks snapped like matchsticks, or their root balls torn up from soggy ground, their roots left dangling in the air, clinging to a layer of dirt. I have seen iris bloom sideways from the ground around a hackberry's massive clump of roots, hanging on above a deep hole the size of a grave excavated by tornado. I have seen a tall pecan come crashing down and tear the roof off a neighbor's house, or live oak level the back bedroom another neighbor ran from moments before. Ice will take down huge limbs in winter. Beetles drill holes to suck the sap and poison the pine's lifeblood. There is ample evidence that trees are mortal, yet standing under the big maple, it was easy to believe that it would always be there, until now when we see the days are numbered. The hollows in its trunk may be filled, or it may be taken down to save the house. But we see it could never live forever, as my mother reminds me that we never know from day to day the span of our own lives. And I feel like Gilgamesh after the death of his great friend, when Utnapishtim, the survivor of the flood, tells him the gods established death and life, yet humans cannot know the days of death. For how long do we build a house? For how long can we sign a lease or raise a child? Every day we climb that tree, every day could be its last, and yet we live as if it isn't. My father died suddenly when his heart gave out. My sister, after 7 years of cancer, 2 gashes in this trunk. My mother has lost 2 sisters, a brother, and countless friends and neighbors, yet she still rises every morning to tend her tree. Which she did not the literal tree, but that metaphorical tree, pretty much until the very end. I was fortunate to be with her last 3 weeks, along with my brother in hospice care and taking care of her. So that was quite a gift. This book would have been probably 20 pages or 15 pages shorter if my previous publisher had stuck with me, but they changed hands and they said, no, we're looking for new people. And so then I was cast out on the publishing seas and doing the shopping your book around, and Mom would say, when's your book coming out? And I'd say, Mom, it takes a while. It's coming. And she did get to read the whole thing. She got to see the PDF of the book that I sent to my publisher, but she was not going to wait a few more months for the book to come out. I mean, she knew she was ready. She was tired. She was ready to go. But because of that delay of about four or more years in finding a publisher, along came that little thing that we all know of as COVID-19 and a pandemic. And so the last section really deals with that more collective kind of grief that we were all feeling as we were coming out of lockdown. I wrote most of these poems in that last section in 2020, starting right before or as COVID started, and then in August and in the fall, and a few come a little later than that. So I'll read a couple of those. This one is there's only a couple that specifically reference COVID, because I was like, I don't want to write about this. I wanted to write about it, but I didn't want to talk about it too directly. I just wanted to write in that context. So this one is titled Quarantine, and I will say most of the details in it come from my life growing up in Iowa in the 1970s. So if there's anything you don't recognize, sorry. But most of it probably will come along. A camp hotel, I do mention that. That was a tent that we had on top of our car that would fold out. It was right before the pop-up campers came along. Brilliant person, built a tent that you could put on your station wagon and then open up. And we camped many summers in that thing. But a lot of people don't know about it. And my mom sold it not too long ago, thank goodness. She was trying to figure out how to take care of all the big things that she had in her house. So this is titled Quarantine. Everything you've ever done has prepared you for this present moment. No, prepared isn't right. Everything you've ever done has led you to this moment, or everything you've ever done created you in this moment, or everything ever done created this moment with you in suspended animation, floating in the semi-solid gelatin of golden memories, surrounded by all you've done, by windmills and wheelchairs, bicycles and binoculars, camp hotels and tilt-a-whirls, hitchhikers, hijackers, and holy rollers, speaking in tongues to reveal that everything that's ever been has led you to this moment, endlessly suspended on the verge of lurching into motion. I don't want to ask anyone to take their mind back to August of 2020, but that's where my mind was, is kind of how do we move? I just have two more. This one is a ghazal. Started writing a few foreign poems. I like ghazals because they use rhyme, but it's not end rhyme. The rhyme comes a little before the end of the sentence. You repeat a phrase at the end of the line in every couplet. You repeat it twice in the first couplet, and then it comes back at the end of each couplet with a rhyme. And the couplets should not be narrative or connected thoughts. They should be distinct, separate things that's been described as pearls strung along a necklace. They go together, but they're not connected to one another, if that makes sense. So I write a lot of narrative poems because ghazals are good for me to say, hey, wait a minute, let's think differently, more associatively. This is titled Zero Gravity. They say the myth of zero gravity can be explained by free fall, how the body in orbit, always falling, never landing, remains in free fall. To approximate zero gravity, astronauts fly to the stratosphere, sustain a dive long and far enough for them to train in free fall. Even the outermost reaches of the universe, black holes and stars tug a body in all directions. Gravity far from zero aligns in free fall. Grief feels this weightless. Thoughts orbit around the same body, losing all sense of orientation, down or up. Life devolves into a mind in free fall. Solar systems, even galaxies, all bodies in the universe orbit or spin around an axis of gravity, their centripetal forces restrained in free fall. So facing the prospect of mortality, ours or the beloved's, the body's inevitable decline into decomposition, we can but pray to reign in free fall. Pray grief's dark mountain not cast its shadow long into this bright valley. Pray the sun may rise again after this endless night of rain in free fall. One other thing you do in a ghazal is you traditionally put your name in the last line. My name is Kendall, which in Welsh is Bright Valley, and Dunkelberg in German is Dark Mountain. So I put Dark Mountain and a Bright Valley in that last couplet. My sensitivity editor wondered, why do you have dark in here? And I had to tell her that's because it's part of the rules, and that's, anyway. I won that battle. I didn't win them all, but I won almost all of them. There are several poems in here, which I won't get into, that deal with myths of the underworld, and I like with quarantine, kept trying to write myself out of the underworld and got a little brighter each time, but could never quite get there, so I decided in the end that I needed to write a creation story. In the beginning, there was darkness and chaos, and no one was afraid of the dark because there was no one until one day Crow appeared. And now the darkness, I saw the darkness and called it good, or she called it good, because there were two crows and no one knew which came first, the dark or the crows. And soon there were so many they were indistinguishable, until one day someone discovered color, and songbirds appeared in their midst, and sunlight came with their songs. But soon they were hungry, so Crow created the plants in the fields, and rain to water the plants, and nectar, fruits and seeds, and schools of fishes in the seas, and worms and reptiles, and all manner of insects for food. And then, because the crows loved their creation, they began to experiment, creating the hairy deer, bears, wolves, dogs, and other mammals, and strange creatures like possums, even the hairless armadillo. Humans were an afterthought, truly naked and pointless. No other animal would use them for food, and yet they could mimic bird calls and were somewhat humorous, helpless, and pathetic creatures until they grew up and grew dangerous. Thank you. We can take questions. I didn't say we could answer them, but we can take them. Christian.
So, question for both of you. What has been, so far, the most rewarding part of having these books out today?
Tonight.
I guess I would say something similar, just to be in a room with people who support you and are happy to see the book in the world is like such a generous experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you write poems, you write essays, and you write for yourself, and you want to get them out there in the world, and you get them into, maybe you get some of them into magazines and that kind of thing. But there's nothing quite like being able to read a poem or read an essay aloud to a group of people and, really share what you said.
Well said.
I think for Kendall.
Yeah.
So you write a lot about Iowa. How has being in Mississippi, do you think, affected how you write about Iowa?
Well, I've been going back to Iowa at least twice a year. So being away from Iowa has affected me. Mississippi and Iowa, I always tell people Mississippi and Iowa are not that different, other than Iowa is pretty homogeneous outside of the bigger cities where we have, and even in our small town now, there's a little more diversity in the population, but when I was growing up, it was pretty homogeneous, so there was that. It has snow, we don't have snow. But mostly it's looking back, kind of from afar and looking back on your childhood and that kind of thing, and being able to get back up there and see it and be reminded of it, and stay in touch with my mother, of course. Yeah, so it's still very close to me. I think it will be more of a difference, as I said in my Rooted interview. It may be more of a difference now. We're going back to clean out her home, but I don't have a lot of other family up there, so there won't be as much reason to be there, and I won't have that home place to go back to, so that may shift more than anything. Yeah.
My question's for Lauren. When you're writing about something so personal, I know sometimes like people have to separate the work from themselves. Did you feel like you had to separate like yourself as you were writing from your childhood experiences, or were you reliving them like fully?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when I was first sitting down and writing, like fresh on the page, some experiences, it was sort of like I was reliving them. And it could be painful to write at certain points. I think for me, I know this isn't true for all memoirists, but for me, writing this was really cathartic, because some memories I just had some shame around them, or like just was like, oh God, that was such a weird experience. But writing through it helped me just kind of like normalize it and accept it, and interpret it in a creative way. But I think once it was on the page, then I was able to feel more distant, revising it and, rearranging it and be like, how can I make this the best it can be, rather than like constantly reliving that memory. So a little bit of both, but I mean, clearly it still makes me sometimes emotional to think about, but that's more so just thinking about my mom. But yeah, I think a little bit of both, but yeah, it feels separate from me now. Yeah.
What was the most difficult part during the writing process, and similarly, that word, what was the most difficult part about the publishing process? Those are, one creative side and one kind of business side.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Okay.
Start, sure.
From the writing side and then the publishing side. The writing side, I think there were certain essays or certain pieces of the book. I didn't write it chronologically, but I had like sticky notes of like, okay, I need to write about my bat mitzvah. I need to write about when I converted to Catholicism, and then so like different pieces that I knew I needed to explore, and so I did that in different ways. And I think one of the hardest pieces for me was there was an essay about my brother, and we're still really close. And so I think writing, for me, trying to be sensitive about his experience, because he had, we're 3 years apart. So even though we were moving back and forth together between houses, he had a different experience, and he handled that differently than I did. And so I wanted to be very sensitive to him. And so that was a difficult piece for me to write about. And then as far as publishing goes, I guess just putting it out in the world and trying to find, I started trying to find an agent, and that was very difficult. And, I think that uncertainty where you wonder if this is ever going to make it into the world as a real book, that's probably the most difficult piece about publishing it. Not knowing what's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, there are poems that were harder than others, but none of them feel like the hardest part of any of it, probably because I just take a lot of time with it. And, one hard part is finding time to actually sit down and write when you're an administrator and that kind of thing. But ordering the collection probably took the most effort, in part just the amount of time. So it's been through a lot of different orders. It's been through several titles. My first title I Googled and or searched on Amazon. I was like, oh, there are 15 or 150 books of that title, with that in the title, starting that way. I was like, yeah, I knew it was a great title, but I also knew, maybe that wasn't good. It was a good working title for me for a long time. And it's kind of the same thing with the second one. And one of the books was like this, because at one point I was going to call it A Necessary Lie. And then I looked that up, and there were like these romance novels that were, I was like, okay, we're not going there. So titles were a challenge in ordering it, but not the kind of difficult challenge where it felt bad to be in it. It was just, I knew it was going to take a while to find the right piece. And it came down to, I think, writing that last section then helped bring it all together in ways. And publishing, it was finding the publisher is the hardest part. And I will just say, I sent it to some really good presses and got some really nice rejection notes back saying, we are full for the next 2 years or whatever. We like it, but we can't do it justice. And I'm like, I can wait. I will wait 2 years. It might take me that long. It probably took me longer. But, so I mean, yeah, sometimes it's just the practical realities of what's going on at a publisher and can they do it. Plus, maybe they're just being nice and didn't really like it that much. I don't know, but I like to think they really meant it. Yeah.
And thinking about, you both have very busy lives and competing priorities. How do you continue to prioritize the work in the face of those realities, and especially when where you weren't certain whether or not you'd find a publisher or not? How do you keep that fire going?
Yeah. Well, the pace of the work. I mean, I would say that when I wrote this, I was in the program and didn't have a kid yet, so I was devoting a little more time to my creative writing practice. But yeah, how do you keep the momentum moving even when you through the uncertainty? I told this story to this in the seminar earlier today, that I had one agent tell me that I should turn this manuscript into a novel and that I'd be able to sell it more easily if it was a novel because it was too niche as a memoir. And I think when I came to terms with that, it actually strengthened my resolve. I was like, I need this to be a memoir. Like I put so much effort into telling the truth in this book that fictionalizing it would feel like it was doing a disservice to all the work that I had put in. And so I think knowing that I believed in it and also having wonderfully supportive people in my life that also believed in it helped me keep submitting it and not taking rejection personally. I just know that's part of the game, and so I have a kind of a thick skin when it comes to that. But yeah, there was just sometimes you just have to ride the burst of motivation to submit it, and then sometimes you'll just need a break from it and you'll come back. And it took a while, but it got there.
Yeah, and I would say in terms of the writing, I'm not one of those writers who can write every day. I can't block out X amount of time every day to sit down and write. That just doesn't work. There are too many demands on my time. I like to say that I write on my morning walks, and I am always, looking at things or thinking about things. I stew a lot on a poem for a long time before I write it down. That's what I tell myself, and that's what I must be doing when I'm not actually writing. And then, and there will be a poem that I'm thinking about, and then I will write it down at some point. I would like to have more time to write more frequently. That's what sabbatical is for. One of the things. But yeah, you just have to find your way of keeping at it in those times when you can't do all the things you want to do. Don't let it leave your mind. Don't let it be, say, oh, I can't do this anymore. You just keep thinking about it, and then in those moments when you can then write down the lines, that's what you do. Yeah, Carrie?
So you guys have both been so generous just with your advice and answering questions earlier today and now, and what you both said just now was very good advice. I just wondered if there's anything else that would be like the kernel of wisdom you would want to pass to other aspiring
kernel of wisdom.
Well, I can use one that I told Megan one time and that she liked, which I still believe. Don't worry about what to call it. Just write it. And we're kind of going back to what I was saying, about not writing every day or not writing, yes, putting your butt in the chair and actually writing is great advice, but sometimes it is almost sadistic advice, and you feel like I'm not a writer, or I'm not any good because I don't sit there and, and torture myself every day. If you can't do it, you can't do it, and you have to figure out how you can do it. No one writes the same way, so just write. Don't worry about what you call it, and just keep at it. Don't let anyone tell you you're not the writer that you should be or whatever. Right?
This is probably cheating because it's something that Ellen Ann Fentress told me when I was working on this book, which was, I was worried about maybe how a family member would interpret something, and she said, just write it. No, totally unfiltered. Don't even worry. No one's reading this over your shoulder. Write it, get everything out, and later when some agent comes in and swoops it up, you can always change it before it gets published. And I think just remembering to just get everything out that you possibly could ever be worried about someone else reading. I guess what applies more to memoir, but could be anything. It was so freeing to me, and I did. Temper some things down before I published it, but just knowing that I could get it all out, I think that is such a good thing to remember. So, stealing Ellen Ann's kernel of wisdom.
Don't
Don't
censor
censor.
yourself before you start.
Exactly, yeah.
I got one for you, Kendall.
Yeah.
So this is book 4. What is the word saying or doing that you haven't said or done in the prior 3?
Yeah. It deals a lot more with mortality than I've dealt with prior. I would say Time Capsules, my second, was a lot about setting down roots and becoming after grad school finally becoming a late blooming adult, saying, oh, I really have to claim that identity and that kind of thing. And this is really looking more beyond that. Yeah. It's probably formally, I've gotten longer lines. I've gotten, which is not, I'm not saying that's the best thing. I probably need to write short lines for a while. I have some haiku in here too, so I have been able to write short lines. Experimentation with some forms like that for me, experimenting for me with it. I did finally crack the haiku. I think I'm pretty decent on those these days. Yeah, so I mean, there were a lot of things. There's a cycle in there, 5 poems, that was commissioned by Lillian Wade from Columbus to write some poems about the National Museum for Women in the Arts for the Mississippi Board of the National Museum for the Women of the Arts. And so she asked me to write 1 poem, and I ended up writing 5 because I liked a couple of artists from the W and one from the W and another person who's in, not from the W, no W connection, but is in the museum. And those took me formally into some spaces that I hadn't gone to, and I see the ripple effect of that in some of the later poems in the book as well. So yeah, I think there's a formal evolution. And they're taking me into my weird intergalactic poems that are coming next. So, yeah.
What's next for you? Oh, well, I'm always working on Rooted magazine, and I have a little germ. I really got into middle grade fiction in the past couple of years. I've told some people this. So I have a gem of a middle grade fiction novel that I'll share offline unofficially. If you want to know more, but yeah, would like to. I haven't been writing a lot while preparing for the book release and everything. So I think that will be nice to have a new project to really sit down and work on.
Lauren, talk about the fish on your cover and what's happening.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the fish on the cover is a black molly. I think you maybe heard it when I was reading about the fish tank chapter. And the publisher designed my cover. I really had nothing to do with that. It's lucky that I like it. But Jan Hoover, who's an alum of this program, and Jan and I both took Ellen Ann's community creative writing class. He's an ichthyologist, and so he's just an incredible human. And he came to the book launch in Jackson, and he was like, "Is that a black molly on the cover?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." He said, "Well, do you know about black mollies?" And I was like, "I mean, not really. I'm not beyond having them as a child in my fish tank." And he told me that black mollies can survive both in salt water and fresh water, and that they adapt to each environment and form different adaptation techniques. And he was like, "That's such a perfect metaphor for the book." And I was just like, "Yes, it is." And I don't think my publisher, I don't think many people know that beyond ichthyologists. So yeah, that's just a fun story. I told him I'm stealing that and telling it to everywhere now. So.
Well, if we are out of questions, we can sign books or chat or whatever.
Sounds good.
Great, thank you guys.